Because women are obligated to cover, some take that as a sign of oppression. What do you have to say about that?
You know, it's ironic that covering one's body and hair has been associated with the term oppression, which to me, I think it's selective targeting against a religion that represents a very high moral standard. When a woman covers herself according to the injunctions of God upon the believing women in Islam, as in the Quran, God says to the Prophet, Ya ayyuhan nabi, قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in the 33rd chapter on the 59th verse says to the Holy Prophet, O Messenger, tell your wives, your daughters and the women of believers that they cover themselves with jalabiyah. Now why is this command from God in the Quran? It is very simple and it's pragmatic. The pragmatic approach in Islam is that the woman is the bearer of society. She's the one who bears our children. Her womb is a sacred facility that brings about the future generations. And the protection of such an institution is fundamental to protect the integrity of the human race. Hence, the obligation of a woman to cover herself. Otherwise, there is no obligation. In fact, the Quran even addresses in the same chapter that if it is post-childbearing years and you cannot bear children under those conditions, then it is not an obligation, it's a recommendation. So the hijab, as we call it, which is a covering, this is what hijab means a curtain. It is a covering to keep the bad, the evil methods and the evil eye against away from the woman so that she is not harmed. Quran says, ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى. It is better for her أَن يُعْرَفْنَا, so that they are recognized, فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ, and they are not bothered. So the hijab, as we see, this covering is actually conspicuously brought forth, not to hide a woman, but actually to make her more visible, but in a dignified way. And that's what the Quran is stating. So the world today has associated oppression with covering simply because it wants to marginalize the power of the moral stance Islam has taken. If you look at all the Abrahamic religions, Judeo-Christian especially, in particular within the general spectrum, you find that this injunction was clearly within their system, but unfortunately they abandoned it over time. The Muslims have maintained it. And I categorically and emphatically state that the hijab in Islam is the flag of modesty in Islam. It represents the highest moral flag. And carrying the flag of modesty in the public, because hijab, as you know, is a public law, not a private law, meaning a woman is not obligated to cover herself in her own house or in her own family, but when she is approached, when she appears in public among people, then she is obligated to cover. So this flag of modesty is under attack today because the geopolitical world today wants to demolish the last bastions of morality so that they can promote their extreme greed and capitalistic ideologies. And what better than to do it impulsively and compulsively at a degraded level of human impulse of sexuality, which is where Islam is head-on against these kinds of enemies. So Islam has brought forth and completed this great religion, and what better than at the moral level? And when a woman is dignified, there is nothing better. When our mothers are dignified, when our daughters are dignified, when our sisters are dignified and not used and abused as commercial objects to sell every object under the sky by placing a scantily dressed woman, then you and I have to consider what are the implications if we are to go on that pathway. And that is why the hijab is certainly not an oppression, but it is certainly an oppression to the destroyers of humanity, to the ones who want to step against the boundaries. They want to destroy the goodness on earth. Yes, that is certainly oppressing them.